So as we think about this, Hinduism, being one of the oldest religions, certainly has a multitude of people. 1.2 billion people on the subcontinent of India, all primarily Hindu. There are mixtures of Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam on the subcontinent of India as well, but Hinduism by far is the religion that is on that subcontinent. And again, 1.2 billion people. So this is a large people group. This is also a very increasing people group in our area because we have a lot more Hindus in our area. Just in case you did not know, my son-in-law's family is Hindu. He is a believer, but my son-in-law's family is Hindu. So what God has given me in this course and understanding some of these things have greatly helped me as I engage with them and talk with them and make cultural things with them so that I have some understanding. So this one in particular, I am living out as we go along here. Now, a couple of things that I want you to understand right off the bat. One of the things I ask my students at TCC to do prior to this, the assignment they get is, I want you to find 10 terms within Buddhism, research this, 10 terms that you are not familiar with. And these come up frequently. And one of the reasons why I want to start with this is because I want you to understand some of the similarities and things that you see. So we have Brahman, say that with me. Brahman. We have Brahmin, say that. Brahmin. And then the last one is Brahma, okay? We have a veterinarian in the room who's going to help us with number 3 in just a second. But the first one is Brahman, okay? And what is that? Well, that's the essence of the universe. That happened to me in staff the other day, and I got mad at the cap of the pen, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to set it gingerly right there. Brahman, the essence of the universe. This is why there are some, as we talked about last week when we got into monotheism and polytheism, one of the reasons why there are groups that say that Hinduism is monotheistic is because of this principle of Brahman. There's a term that's called monism. So write that down. You're not going to have that in any of your notes here. I've got it in other places, but not here. So monism, M-O-N-I-S-M. M-O-N-I-S-M. Monism is a belief in a deity that has multiple forms. A belief in a deity that has multiple forms. Now, many of our animistic religions, like Native American religion, have a lot of this idea of monism, which you will have one overarching deity, but that deity comes in a multiplicity of forms. So the whole idea in Native American religion is the understanding that a young man goes out on a vision quest, and he, either by killing an animal or hunting an animal or seeing an animal, has a uniqueness tied to that animal. And that may change his name as a part of the whole vision quest process. Well, but that animal is seen as a singular form of a greater deity. And this is what we see within Hinduism. Brahman is, we're going to see this essence of the universe, especially the last slide tonight we're going to hang out with, and that is the reincarnation cycle. If you remember one thing about Hinduism, I want you to grasp the reincarnation cycle because it is cyclical. If you understand the reincarnation cycle, you will understand those of this East Asian mindset from which Buddhism, Jainism, Confucianism, Taoism, Shinto, and Sikhism, all those religions come from this idea of reincarnation. So we're going to camp out in reincarnation a little bit because when you see that, you begin to understand why they think circularly as opposed to linearly like we do. Linear religions, of which Christianity is one, is that begins with a pre-existent God who created the world and then gives life to us, so birth, life, death, and a sense of the afterlife. All of our linear religions, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Islam, and Christianity, all are linear religions. But cyclical religions roll in this circle idea, which means there is life, death, rebirth, birth, life, death, and then rebirth, okay? That's the principle that's going to govern this. So that's a huge thing as we deal with Hinduism. We're going to get to that. But this whole idea of Brahman is that we want to lose ourselves into the essence of the universe. Thus, particular methodologies to do so, like yoga, which we will talk about next week. Now, I am not a believer that if you do yoga, you're practicing Hinduism. I do not believe that. But yoga is a principally based activity through which you yoke yourself to a particular deity. And so that is what the yoga process, if you're thinking of it from a terms of a deity, that you might do, okay? But yoga, for me, helps me stretch, and I need that more and more and more. Okay, so that's Brahman. We're going to see that again. Now, Brahmin, clearly there is a linkage to these things. But Brahmin is the priestly caste, or you will also see this term, Varna. Caste or Varna. Now, we're going to talk a lot about the caste system. Hey, Dave, I'm over here. Are you moving this? See? Are you keeping up with me? I don't know whether you are or not. If you're at home today, that's Dave Edom, and I have his phone number if you would like to call him. All right. But the Brahmin caste is the highest caste, which we're going to talk a good bit about. That's the one thing you're going to talk about around your tables today. It is the priestly caste, the highest one, which basically has rulership over all other people. All right, so we'll talk about that, but that is Brahmin. Now, Brahma, okay? Where have you seen this term before? The vet does not need wrestling. Are you serious? Okay. What else? Okay, cattle, okay? This is the cattle with the hump, okay? Now, you guys don't know as much about this, but I was a rancher, okay? We raised we had about 250 head of cattle. I fed 70 steers every morning and evening of my life for a good many years, and my father was a custom home builder. Okay, this is why I was called to ministry at a very early age, okay? I did not want anything to do with those two family businesses. And guess what I get to do? I get to pasture sheeple, okay? And instead, cattle are looking better. No, I'm just teasing. All right, so Brahma is a particular deity within Hinduism, and it is the more of the understanding. Brahma has kind of a reference to the creator God, okay? So we'll see that a little bit more as we go along. So what we're going to talk about then, I like to start with that because we understand some of the terms. We see that there's a lot of similarities. It'd be very easy to get mixed up with some of these things, and so that's the reason we want to look at that. All right, and Mike, I managed to get myself off of the deal. Okay, so let's start with this. Hinduism, as it begins, from the Sanskrit name of the river Indus, okay? The reason, matter of fact, today there are many Hindus that wouldn't really like to be called Hindu because it was basically from the colonial occupation of Britain that some of this actually arrived, okay? And so the Sanskrit actually uses the river Indus. The people across the river Indus are the Indu, which later becomes Hindu, okay? So the river Indus. Now, where does the river Indus run? Well, we have very natural barriers, which is key to understanding Hinduism and how it developed virtually unfettered for many, many eons of centuries, okay? And the reason is because it has massive natural barriers. It has the Bay of Bengal on the southeast. It has the Arabian Sea on the southwest. It has the Indian Ocean on the south. And it has this little bitty process. What's that? No. They're gonna get the PDFs of this, so they'll have it. So just focus on the speaking of it. So what you have in the north is you have this little bitty mountain range. Anybody know what that is? That's the Himalayas, okay? So nobody's coming over the Himalayas in those early centuries, okay? Because it's very, very informative to be able to come across. So the only place that Hinduism could be thwarted by an invading group is through this northwest section. This is called the Punjab. This is also the region of Pakistan today. And the wars that are happening right now between India and Pakistan are happening right there in that particular area. That little area is the place where Sikhism develops. Now, we're not going to cover Sikhism, so let me say just a hair about it here. It develops because Islam is coming in from the northwest, Iran, Turkey, and Hinduism has a barrier to it from the subcontinent of India. And there's a major clash that's occurring at that particular point. So Sikhism, being all wise that they're trying to do, they take elements of Islam, a significant, fully monotheistic religion, and they take elements of it, and they take the reincarnation belief from Hinduism, and they bring those two things together. Two things that we can't really comprehend of how you would bring those two things together. And by trying to appease both religions, guess what they did? They offended both, okay? So Sikhs have always kind of been on the run and militaristic because Sikhism tries to be a blend of these two religions that are clashing in that particular place. So the Indus River is this place where we get the understanding of Hinduism. But now we want to get to the origins of Hinduism. And Mike, it did it again. So just click to the next, somebody click to the next one. I'm timing out because I'm going too long. There we go. I got it back. I got it back, brother. Okay, there we go. So we have very little knowledge about where the origins of Hinduism is, but this is incredibly interesting. The origins of Hinduism comes from a group called Aryans. They are what the word Aryan means ruler. Now, where have you heard the word Aryan before? Germany and Hitler, okay? That is not what we're talking about. That guy was a lunatic, and he didn't have anything to do with what actual reality of what Aryans were. He thought that they were some mythical group of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. They were not. The Aryans, what actually it means, are rulers or nobles. Now, here's the interesting thing. They actually originated around the Iran-Iraq area. There are some pretty major rivers in the Iran-Iraq area. Does anybody have a knowledge of what those rivers are? The Tigris and the... Now, follow with me on this. If it is true that this group actually migrated down to this northwest section of India and began to be the people who would then develop Hinduism, there's in the Vedic literature, which this is the Vedas, so I'm going to say Vedas, that's the scriptures of Hinduism, or the Vedic literature. So in the Vedic literature are all of these deities that he talks about that came from up in this area, in this northwest section, which is now today Turkey, Iran, Iraq. Now follow with me. What religions did we say developed out of Hinduism? This is a quiz, pop quiz. Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Confucianism, Taoism, and Shinto. Now, let's take our linear religions. Judaism, Zoroastrianism, which we're not going to talk about. It's really fun to talk about, but we're not going to take time to do it. Comes from the same area, Persia, okay, which is right in this same area. Islam and Christianity. If this is the case, that Hinduism does originate from these Aryan rulers who came down, guess what? All world religions emanated from the Tigris-Euphrates area, Iran, Iraq. Same place as a little place called the Tower of Babel. Now, isn't that interesting that all of these religions would then split out and go elsewhere, and what might cause them to go elsewhere? From 1500 BCE, or 1500 for us, I have to say BCE. If you don't know what that is, it is before Common Era. That is the woke way to say BC, before Christ. Now, does anybody know? No, I'm not going to say anybody, but, because some of you do, I know. AD, do you know what AD means? After death, right after the death. No. It means anno. I told you, see, smart people in the room need not apply, okay? Anno Domini is AD, and it is the year of our Lord, which starts with Jesus at 0, but the Romans got it wrong, and it's actually about 4 BCE when Jesus was actually born. So, okay, so as we look at this, if we have all these religions who develop, At 1500 BCE, the timeline for Christianity, the timeline for Judaism is Moses is in Egypt around 1500 BCE. So when we look at this as an ancient religion, there's certainly things that predate 1500 BCE because it's these religions that are taking place up in this Indo-European, Iran, Iraq area, and then it migrates down. Now, one of the deities that is mentioned there is a god named Mithras. Mithras was the symbol of Mithras was a bull. Now, what's interesting about that is there was a religion in Rome that rivaled Christianity. They were both persecuted in early Rome. It's called Mithraism, and its symbol was a bull. And Mithras, in the Vedic literature, what becomes the most revered animal in India? It is the bull. So the similarities, the way that these come across are just incredibly interesting. And if this is the case, it really builds the understanding for the potential of, hey, that the Tower of Babel really happened and that all world religions stretched out from that point, from that particular area, which is just incredibly interesting. Now, we also know, don't forget, Tower of Babel happens after the flood, and so Ararat is in modern-day Turkey, and so this migration of Noah's sons would have happened into that Indo-European area. So that just gives us kind of a biblical timeline to understand some of those things, which I just think are incredibly interesting. Brings us to the origins of Hinduism, and so let's camp out a little bit on this issue called the Varna or caste system. So here are our caste. So we start on the far right. Well, we'll start on the far, let's go to the right because it's number 5. It's Brahmin because we've already listed it. That's the priestly caste. The next one in line are the Kshatriyas. Starts with a K, but the K is silent. I learned that from one of my students as I kept pronouncing it Kshatriyas, and they went, the K is silent. And I went, thank you. All right. So Kshatriyas, these are the chieftains, also known as Rajas. All right? So chieftains, rulers, military-type people, these are the Kshatriyas. The third in line is called the Vaishya. Vaishyas are the commoners or merchants, people who would tend to own businesses. The fourth are the Shudras. These are what's called the conquered peoples, people who work in agriculture, people who work for other people. These are the Shudras, the conquered people. And the last group are the Dalits. These are not even considered a caste. Until 1948, and a young man named Gandhi, who helped change the Constitution of India, this particular people group was not realized and recognized as a people group. They were less than human, which we will understand when we see the reincarnation process. But I list them here because they are still viewed today as untouchables or Dalits. Now, through the modernization of society, some of those things are beginning to equal out. If you come in contact with Hindus here, I'm guaranteeing you they're likely going to downplay the caste system. But in rural India, specifically, it is very much in play that people are divided in these specific castes. So much so that females can marry up one caste, but can never marry down. Men can marry down one caste and pick up a lady from a lower caste, only one, but can never marry up. All right? And so your family history is going to determine which particular caste you would be in. And here is your table discussion. So turn around. And here's what I want you to do. We're going to leave this up here for just a minute, for about 5 minutes. And here's what I want you to discuss. I want you to pick, based on your life or your parents' life, which one of these castes would you be in? All right? And when I do this with my students, I say, no matter what caste you would be in, I'm a pastor and I'm above all of you suckers, all right? So how do you like that, all right? So maybe to understand that, if your father was in the military like Chris Baker, he's probably going to be a Kshatriya, okay? So Chris, that's what you are, I'm going to tell you, all right? If your If your parent, if you grandparent, somebody in your family has been in ministry or a Catholic priest or something else, you might call yourself, make a case for you being a Brahmin. If your parents owned a business, no matter what kind it was, you would be a commoner or merchant, a Vaishya. And if you worked for others, your parents or you worked for the big corporations, you are a Shudra. And if your parents ran a funeral home, a cleaning business, or, God forbid, were my favorite people, the trash collectors. I really love my trash collector's name is John, and he is one of my good friends, all right? So you determine which caste you think you would be in. Would the Walters, would you guys join this group right here so you can have a little bit more discussion? All right, talk about it amongst yourselves. And tell everybody why you would choose that particular caste. Test one. Okay, had a little fun with that. Okay, now I'm being very facetious as I go around to your tables, but here's what I want you to feel. The key question that I ask my students is this: how does it make you feel being in the group you're in? Okay? Now, this is where we have to begin to understand that this is a whole different mindset, which really goes to this opportunity to talk about relationships. Okay? This is a great question to ask. Hey, if your family was still in India, what would your caste be? And how do you feel about that? That's a great question to ask. Because it's an opportunity just to find out. Because again, what we want to do is we try to give salt and light to the gospel, give flavoring to the gospel that leads people to want more. You want to be interested in what people are, okay? So often our evangelism opportunities don't focus on, now the ones we teach here certainly do focus on this, but we don't focus our evangelism opportunities on listening and caring for people. My favorite method is the opportunity for us to listen to their story, tell your story, tell God's story. When I listen to other people and where they're at, I'm gaining an audience of an opportunity for me to share my story. Why do we tell my story before I tell God's story? Because now I've been entered into a relationship with them. I am hearing their story, then I'm relating how my story might fit in some with theirs. Or it may be in opposition, not opposition, but it may be very different than theirs. And then, now that I've got a relationship somewhat established, now I can share God's story in this. All right, I was being facetious in the fact that if a mom and a dad, you're trying to gauge on this, now you can't get this wrong. And I mean, this is not a thing where you get it wrong, but I'm being kind of outlandish with this, because if your mom or your dad had something and your mom's place would be higher, you're going to go with your dad because it's a male-dominated society. The other part of this is if it's something you do, maybe you have equated to other things. I am a college graduate, master's, got my PhD. My brother got his master's. My sister got her undergraduate. My parents had a high school education. My parents put all three of us through college debt-free because of what they accomplished outside of these things. And I've been forever grateful for my parents to want something better for us. It's what we all want for our kids, right? But the truth of the matter is, when you think about this process, it's not what you've achieved, it's likely what your family had achieved, because that's how this is determined. So, how in the world, in a Western understanding, do we look at this caste system and realize that once the die has been cast into a caste, that is who you are, and it's whoever you will be, okay? And it comes into this process that we're going to begin to talk about, and this is what we call dharma, okay? D-H-A-R-M-A, dharma. So what dharma is fulfilling your role. That's what dharma is. So from the Hindu understanding, the best thing a good Hindu can do is not achieve more than others. The best thing a Hindu can do is fulfill the role that they have been given. So the idea for us of rising above your caste and going further than your parents did is not really within the reincarnational mindset of a Hindu. It is you be the best Dalit you can be. That's it. That's the highest role that one can achieve. And it just makes this incredibly interesting as we look at those things. So now we're going to look at the Hindu scriptures. What are the scriptures? Okay, the Vedas. We mentioned that. Vedic text. This is not the full Vedas. This is some excerpts from it. But if you have an interest in looking at this briefly, I'll be happy for you to take that and look at that. So as we're looking at that, the next thing that we see is, well, there we go. Okay, the oldest of the sacred books. Veda simply means knowledge in Hindi. So as we are in the Sanskrit, it is knowledge. And there are 4 different Vedas. There is the Rig Veda. This is basic hymns and mythology. Now, here's the key thing. This is one of our big terms that I didn't get to do this lecture, but I'm going to bring this out here. All right, mythology. Myth. Myth is the story of the dealings of gods with humans. When we hear the word myth, what do we automatically think of? Something that's false, okay? But in the terms and the understandings of faith and religion, myth simply is the story. So someone might look at the Bible and say, well, that's Christianity's myth. They're not saying it's false. Well, they may be, but it's that the word itself does not mean that. It is the story of God dealing with humanity as we look at Christianity, but in Hinduism, it's the gods and how they deal with humanity. So the Rig Veda deals with that and some basic hymns, some songs that go with that. The Yagar Veda is recited during sacrifice or rites. Now, Hinduism is a fertility-based religion. It is incredibly, the imagery within Hinduism is very sexual in nature because it is fertility-based. So when a male deity and a female consort deity come together, they create things but through that reproduction. So the imagery in many of these temples are going to be of a very sexual nature. So don't take your kids into a Hindu temple and not understand that that may be what you're going to find. Now, not necessarily here in the Metroplex, but if you're in India, that's what you're going to see on the walls. The images are going to be there, okay? So when we get into this, the Yagar Veda is recited during sacrifices. So not only is it fertility-based, but it's also sacrificially based. There's lots of killing within Hinduism. And when we get into some of our other religions like Buddhism, they make a specific attempt to move away from that part of Hinduism. So we'll see that when we get into Buddhism. So lots of killing of things in the sacrifices. The Sama Veda are chants during these sacrifices, and the Atharva Veda is rituals that are used in the home. And that's what Atharva means, is things that happen inside the home. All right, next we look at each Veda. So there's 4 parts of the Veda, and there are 4 parts to each of the 4 parts. So you get kind of what's going on here. You got multiple parts of each of these. So each Veda has 4 parts: hymns, ritual materials. Now this is going to be how does one live or act or do life as a Hindu. Materials for religious pursuits. That's going to be much more clear in just a few minutes as we get into what a Hindu male does throughout their lifetime, the religious pursuits of males, because again, this is a male-dominated society, as many of these early religions were. And then what's called the Upanishads. Now, the Upanishads are the philosophical material. Comes much later, and it's actually the Upanishads, this philosophy, that begins to help us understand how all of this caste system works. It's the Upanishads that actually brings to the end of the Vedas, which the word is called Vedanta, the end of the Vedas. And so it begins to move away from the scriptures, and that's where Buddhism and Jainism and some of these other religions that are actually atheistic begin to form because they get rid of the Vedic scripture, okay? So we're going to talk next time about specific philosophies, including yoga, next week when we get into our second part of Hinduism. So this is the Vedic text, or the Vedas, and how it's basically outlined. Now, these Upanishads, this is basically where we get Hindu philosophy. And here's where all the words that help us understand Hinduism are going to emanate from. So what are some of those words? Well, all that is not Brahman or Brahman is not real. Okay? Now process through. This gets into the philosophy, so we're going to a little bit deeper view of thought. If it's not the essence, it's not real. So how do we determine what that is? Well, humans have a false knowledge, which is Maya, okay? So what Hinduism says is not that you're born sinful, but that you have a false knowledge that you're going to have to, in some way, shape, or form, lose if you're going to ever be one with the essence of the universe, which is the actual goal, which will become much more clear as we look at the reincarnation cycle. But humans have false knowledge. You got to get rid of that in order to be one with the universe, which is the ultimate goal of this. Now, this is very interesting to the Western world. The Atman. The Atman is the essence of the individual. Now, the whole goal, here it is in a nutshell. If you don't get anything, get this. We'll talk about it again when we talk about the reincarnation cycle, but it's this. The whole goal of Hinduism is to lose your individualness into the oneness of the universe. Okay? So that means, what's individual about you? What are some things that are individual about us? I'm going to repeat this for the video. So what's individual? The way we look. Is our gender individual? Yep. What else? The way we act, the way we think, the comforts that we have, okay? How many of you like only to sleep in your bed, okay? You do not like going to hotels, okay? Raise your hands high, there we go. All right, I'm that person. I like my bed. I don't like anybody else's bed. I don't like going to my daughter's and staying there because the bed's not as comfortable to me, okay? It's the coolness like the underside of my pillow, okay? You understand what I'm talking about? How many of you have actually named your pillow? Okay. This is a good place not to raise your hand on that one. But I know some of you have. My father-in-law has, and many of you know him. His pillow's named Pookie. And so you need to find him on Sunday and say, I hear that your pillow is named Pookie, and I will have great joy over that. Just don't tell him I said it, all right? But here's the thing. Anything, this is going to be huge when we talk about Buddhism. Anything that you have attachment to, you got to get rid of. That's what Hinduism says. You want to get rid of anything that makes you individualistic. Now, in the Western world, we are all about our individualism. Pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, do our own thing. And that's the reason this flies in the face of so much of that. The whole goal of Hinduism is to get rid of anything that makes you an individual so that you become one with the essence of the universe. So now we'll talk about kind of how that begins to happen. We got a couple other terms. Humanity's problem is ignorance, and only when true knowledge is discovered will they experience release from the cycle of reincarnation. So only when true knowledge. Now, there was something that was going on when John, Paul, James, and I'm not talking about the Beatles, when they were writing the New Testament. That was a joke, folks, and you can laugh, okay? All right. When they were writing the New Testament, there was a group that was called Gnostics. They were people who were trying to show that there was an essential knowledge, that if you got this essential knowledge, that you would then be launched into a true understanding of who Jesus was, okay? And Gnostics are the reason why 1 John in particular was written to address the issue of Gnosticism in the early church. Well, what we're seeing here in Hinduism comes right into the understanding of that, where this true knowledge must be discovered, something that the typical human being could not achieve. And here's the truth. None of the lower caste could ever achieve this. Only a Brahmin could achieve this. And only a Brahmin male, which we're going to get to the reincarnation system, and I got to do that pretty quickly. All right. So the other is the task of religion is to overcome the Maya, the deception, and to realize the true self and experience a new plane. And what is that new plane? The essence of the universe. That's the whole goal of Hinduism. Now, let's bring it to terms that we have heard before. Karma, okay? But typically karma rules the process of Hinduism. But when we think of karma, we tend to think of karma as being bad. But karma is not bad in the understanding of Hinduism. Karma is good and bad. Basically, what karma means, it's your consequences. Whatever you do, good or bad, if you do good things, you'll get good consequences. If you do bad things, you'll get bad consequences. But here's the problem with Hinduism. What determines what's good and bad? I can't tell you. I don't know whether it's the deities. I don't know whether it's the Upanishads and the Vedic text. Well, it can't be, because eventually Hinduism goes away from all those things. I can't tell you what really is good and what is right and what is wrong within Hinduism. There's no real understanding of that. However, karma is going to play it out. Whatever your consequences are. Now, here's what happens in the reincarnation system. You can evolve up through life forms, but you can also devolve down. So if you do bad actions, whatever bad actions are, next time you'll come back in a lower life form. And ladies, the way that this works is you must go from, once you've made it to human being, and then you're Dalit, you must be female Dalit. The next life, if you do well, you're male Dalit. Then female Shudra, then male Shudra. Then female Vaishya, then you come back as male Vaishya. You're on this endless loop. And by the way, that's when you get in human form. And so your goal now is whatever your particular role is, but if not, you'll go down to the female of that same group. Ladies, you'll drop down to the male of the next lowest caste, okay? This is the reality of the Hindu process and Hindu system. Very little hope, very little light. Do what you're supposed to do. Keep your head down. Don't mess up the system and just be a cog in the wheel. That's the Hindu system, which is why we have such a great opportunity to bring hope into that system. Kathy?
Do they, as a society, have any standards for
Morals. Yeah, it's a great point. Does Hinduism as a society have a standard for moral choices or moral things?
Like, if you killed somebody, would you go to jail?
Yes. So, but all of those were implemented by the British system. Okay? So prior to that, not likely. The only thing that would govern that are the Rajas who were in charge of that. And so basically whatever they wanted to do became the law. There wasn't necessarily any written law. That's why in 1948 with Gandhi having significant influence upon it in the Constitution of India, so it became a democratic state. So certainly those things were implemented. But those were Western standards, where do we think that we got those Western standards were based off the Judeo-Christian ethic. Okay, so all those things are interesting conflicts with this, but they didn't emanate from the Hindu system. But it's a great question with that. All right, the samsara. Now here we go. The samsara. The samsara is the name of the reincarnation system. It's the journey. So you understand now why it's a journey. Because it's this cycle that I continue to go through. I go up, I go down. I do this, I do that. So it is this journey that you're on. So that's the samsara, to wander across, to move from one place to another, to a different place and time that happens. And then moksha. Moksha is the breaking of the cycle. So what is moksha? It is when you no longer are going round and round and you break free. For Buddha, it became the moment of enlightenment. For Krishna, it became whatever point that Krishna came to. It is when your Atman is lost into the Brahman. Your individual nature is lost into the essence of the universe. And when you've done that, which only a Brahman could do, you have experienced moksha. Now, here's what's incredibly interesting. Two religions that develop out of Hinduism at around the 6th century. So 6th century, same time period as Ezekiel, Isaiah. It's in the Babylonian captivity time period and Persian captivity time period for Israel. This is when Buddhism and Jainism both develop. Now here's what's interesting. You have two individuals who formed new religions. Did they think they were forming new religions? I really don't think that they did. They were actually acting within certain Hindu philosophies. Okay, we'll get into a little bit of that more next time. But here's what's interesting. Both of these individuals, Siddhartha Gautama, who becomes the Buddha, and a man named Mahavira, who develops Jainism, both of these were Kshatriyas. So take a guess of what they throw out. Now, they're not Brahmins. What do you think they throw out of Hinduism? They throw out the caste system. Okay? I find that incredibly interesting. Here are two people. If you're going to start a new religion within Hinduism, you're going to need to be a Brahmin. And both of these individuals were Kshatriyas, and the first thing they do is throw away the caste system so that it becomes more open to others and certainly makes it more amenable to them being the leader and founder of new faiths. Just a very interesting process as you look at that. All right, there's a couple more, but dharma, as I mentioned earlier, that's your duty. You could also you could put the word in purpose. It's how you live out your purpose. It's what your duty actually is. And then kama is pleasure. So if you've ever heard of the Kama Sutra, the idea is it is the pathway of pleasure, okay? Don't go look it up, okay? But I'm just saying that's where it comes from. The kama is the pleasure aspect, okay? So that's where that comes from. And then the artha is status, what status you actually have. And then I said earlier, moksha is the release. Now, salvation, that's in quotes. There's not an understanding of salvation within Hinduism. So it's not even an idea of heaven. It's not even really, within Hinduism, it's not an idea of Buddhist nirvana. The idea is you cease to exist. That's the end result of, what is vibrating? That is the end result of Hinduism, is that your individualism ceases to exist. You, in essence, cease to exist, and you become one with the universe. That's the reason the hopelessness of this is so prevalent. Shauna, you got a question?
Yes, so you said artha means status. That's status on this whole cycle?
Yes, but it's the status of who you are. So the way you live that out. That's probably one of the terms I know the least, to be quite honest with you, artha. But it's something again, as you're looking at this cycle, but artha is not, it's not anything that I've really meshed into really what's the nuance of that particular term.
So everyone else other than Brahmins are just on this constant cycle, never to come off.
Mike, I may need help. I got stuck here. It's not going. So say that one more time.
I was just going to say, you said the only people that could actually attain
Moksha is Brahmins.
male Brahmins.
Because
But everyone else, when they die, it's just constant.
up or down. Yeah, up or down. You don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to go up or down. Did that make sense? Okay, so that's going through that.
Live a life good enough where they can, in some point of reincarnation, become Brahmin? Or is that
Yes. No, not living, only on death.
right? When you death and you come back as a female Brahmin or
And then a male Brahmin. It's a process of what you're doing. Now, keep in mind, I've only told you the human things. You start as, I don't know what, but no, you're starting below that. You're starting as paramecium. You're starting as some worm, and you're evolving up into fish, and then something else, and then goose, and then.
So the Western ideology behind reincarnation to a kid of being, this is just some neat facet to them, is a literal nightmare they're living in.
Absolutely. It is totally a nightmare, and there's no hope within it. You're going to run it from back there. So, it's a nightmare to live in, because that's what I'm saying. There's no hope within it, only to do your job. Yeah. And so death, why is the suicide rate so high? Because start over. Why not? Let's start over. Let's do this a different way. Yeah. And so hope is one of those things.
So Buddhism came from Hinduism.
Yes.
Do you think the term monks came from?
So there are Christian monks, there are Islamic monks, there are Buddhist monks. So, and there are Hindus that it's not really a monk system, but there are, we're going to get into it next, who some of these people are. So when you see the Hare Krishnas, so they're going to be sometimes robed this way. By the way, this is one of the interesting things. Have you heard the word avatar? Okay, where have you heard the word avatar? I know the movie. Okay, the movie. Where else have you heard avatar? This is not hang on. Let me talk to the youngest people in this audience. Okay, what is an avatar? A profile picture. Did you know, Elijah, that's Hindu? An avatar is the human form of a deity. The picture of what a deity would look like if they were in human form, which is another bridge word, because who is Jesus? He is God in flesh. Okay? So this idea of avatar is that it is someone who has reached the place of moksha, but has remained human in order to lead others, who are avatars of certain deities. Krishna and Buddha were seen as avatars of the god Vishnu, which we're going to try to get to, but I'm really moving slowly in this. All right, so laws of Manu. Let's go on with this. All right, hit that next thing. This created the Varna system. I'm going to go a little bit quicker with this. So it created all the classes. But here the stages of life are set in motion. So for every Hindu male, these are the 4 stages of life. Here we see another 4 stages of life. This is going to blow you away. All right, the first one is the student. The student may be a student till 35 or so, but this is a point at which you are a student trying to learn the faith. But the second stage is the householder. The householder is when you might marry, okay, and take on a family. You become the householder. But once you've reached the stage and your family is born, they've been taught, they're somewhat raised, Hindu men would go into what's called the hermit lifestyle. They would leave and abandon their family. Okay? Now, the interesting thing about this is exactly what Siddhartha Gautama, later known as Buddha, exactly does. This is what Mahavira in Jainism does. They are following the pattern of Hinduism. In the Western world, we go, this is abandonment. Why would they do this? Now, they are leaving them with other families, so grandparents, other people who are in the home, but they are abandoning their families to link themselves to a guru, a teacher. That's the hermit lifestyle. To finally what is called the sannyasin. The sannyasin state is the wanderer state. That's where you take only clothes. So this, if you go to India and you find men that are only wearing something around their waist, kind of an underwear type of thing, and then when it's gone, and they go about naked. Because there's a lot of nakedness in Hinduism. What they're doing is they're trying to get to that is frowned upon in this establishment, okay? I want you to understand that. So, but the sannyasin state is, what are they trying to do? What's the end goal of Hinduism? What did I say? Become one with the universe. That means you have attachment to nothing, and that means even clothes or dignity, all right? So the sannyasin state, now this is for Hindu males. Women are not allowed to process through that. But they do this in order to gain merit towards becoming something higher in their next life. Okay? So they'll go through this hermit stage to the point of only getting food from others until they no longer receive food, and then they die. And if you go to India today, you will see these individuals on the streets at all time. And you think, oh, they're homeless. No, they're not. They're sannyasins who are trying to get to a higher state within the religion. All right? Now, these stages are only for men. I mentioned that. Go ahead. And these laws cover the morality of the way that one should live. So if there is a sense, Kathy, of where morality comes, it's in this process. Now, it would also come from the part of the Veda that gets you rituals, things that you should, the way that one should act would give you a little bit more of an idea of what's right and wrong, but any sense of morality comes here. But what's it based on? It's based on getting rid of everything, losing all attachment to anything that you possibly can. Now, we're going to find, oh no, we're not studying Jainism, but Jainism would show us that this is what Mahavira did to the point of extreme. Mahavira would sweep the streets in front of him so as not to step on any living thing. Extreme, what's called ahisma. Ahisma is extreme nonviolence. And guess what? Jains lost a lot of their property as people. And there's not very many Jains today because they were taken over by others. Why? Because Jains would not retaliate. They're not going to fight. Okay? So if I got a group of Jains over here, you're going to go, I'm going to go take what they've got because it's better than what I got, and they're not going to fight me for it because they're Jains. Okay? So that takes place throughout centuries, and now it is very difficult to be a Jain because of that. All right, let's go on. The Bhagavad Gita, okay? Bhagavad Gita. Say that with me. Bhagavad Gita. This is the epic poem. It's part of the the Vedic scriptures, but it's a poem about a great battle. It's a particular individual named Arjuna. Arjuna is riding with his charioteer, who is an individual named Krishna, who is an avatar of the god Vishnu. Krishna is his charioteer. And the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita is simply this: Arjuna does not want to fight his evil cousins. His cousins are evil people, and he doesn't want to fight them because they're family. But Krishna says to Arjuna, you must perform your dharma. You must do what you must do and destroy your evil cousins, because this is what you've been given to live out your life. So that is the whole poem of the Bhagavad Gita, is this struggle that he's going through to do this, because he doesn't want to destroy his family, but he must, because in order to elevate himself in life, he must perform what is his particular task. And that's the reason the message to the Dalit or the Vaishya or the Shudra is just do your duty. Whatever that is, do your duty. You're not going to elevate unless you do your duty in this life. All right, Bhagavad Gita. All right, let's go on to the next thing. I think we're going to get into the actual deities themselves. All right, so we're going to look at three particular deities. There are 330 million. Okay, 330 million deities. Now, I'm teaching Hinduism at a 30,000 foot level. But if you travel into India, which Zach and I might get to do here pretty shortly, if you travel into India and you go into a regional area, you're going to see worship of a particular deity. It may be a female deity or a male deity, depending upon your particular family and what particular temple you go to. All right? So the idea is, Richard, you might worship the snake god. If you're up in Uttar Pradesh, right up against the Himalayas, you're probably going to worship the snake god. Okay, and I'm not going to mention that particular deity tonight. Or over here, you guys might worship Lakshmi. And Lakshmi is the consort deity, the female, that goes with either Vishnu or sometimes Brahma, depending on who she wanted to be with. But nevertheless, this is where this goes, and you might worship that particular deity. So where we look at it as polytheistic, and it is, depending on where you grew up geographically, you may worship a particular deity in your area. Okay, does that kind of make sense? Okay. But we're going to look at three particular primary deities. These are what's called the Trimurti. These are the top three. Okay? So the first one is Brahma. Brahma is this creator deity, and this is what you'll often see depicted. You see four things in his hand. You see, go to the next one. Oh, Sarasvati. This is one of his consort deities, females, but also Lakshmi is another one of those. So what is Brahma holding? He's holding, first of all, a kamandalu. This is a gourd, and what does that mean? It represents water, and it's simple, a self-contained life. Next, a rosary. Now, here's what's interesting. He holds a rosary. Where have you heard of a rosary before? Catholicism. Did you know that Hinduism has a rosary? Catholicism has a rosary. Islam has a rosary. All three of them. Does Buddhism? Okay, interesting. So, didn't know that. So, all of these have a rosary. Now, the beads mean different things, okay? But in this particular face, the rosary indicates time, and there are four faces of Brahma, and those four faces indicate the four Vedas, okay? It also might be one of the characters in the book of Revelation, but I don't know. Don't hold me to that here. All right, there are four-faced beings in Revelation that I'm not quite sure what they're doing either. So, all right, next is Shiva. One bad dude, okay? Shiva. Shiva's often seen holding the trident. He is the destroyer god, which sounds terrifying, does it not? Not if you're Hindu. Because what must happen for new life to begin? The old life must die. So, here is a picture of Vishnu. Can anybody make out what he's standing on? Somebody with good eyes? A baby. Vishnu is destroying a baby, and that is horrific to us. But here's the reality of Hinduism. If anything's going to be reborn, it has to die first. Vishnu is killing the baby because what better time for him to begin a new life? And so infant mortality, the prevalence of life meaning something, really is lost within Hinduism. All right, let's go back to Shiva. We're good? All right. Shiva is often seen with the trident. Kali and Parvati are two of his consorts. And by the way, the only thing worse than Shiva is Kali. She is one bad mama jama, okay? She is the worst of all. And you want to talk about evil, Kali represents evil. What's Shiva holding? The trident, again, destruction, an axe, okay? Great things that Shiva is holding, okay? We're loving this. A flame of fire, and then often, is there one more thing? Nope, that's it. Okay. So now notice what he's holding up. That is the symbol on his hand is the Om symbol, okay? So we're only going to do this once. So everybody do it with me. Everybody go, Om. Okay, now listen. Om. This is the sound of the universe, okay? So the Om sound, and the reason it's involved in so many things is to get you to a oneness, get you to a place of, and it's to be the sound of the universe, okay? In meditation, and getting to that sound is the idea to bring you to a sense of oneness within that, all right? And then the third is, I'll leave him for last. He's the most likable deity within Hinduism, and this is Vishnu. Now, Vishnu is often seen to be the helper of people in their life. Thus, the belief that Krishna and Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, are avatars of Vishnu because what did they do? They reached a place of enlightenment and hung around to help people know how to get to the path. That's, in essence, what Buddhism is going to basically show. Lakshmi is the particular consort incarnations of Vishnu. I mentioned Buddha, Matsaya, and certainly Krishna is one of those as well. All right, Vishnu is holding these things, a shell or conch, which by blowing it you hear the Om, or the sound of the ocean, or whatever's going on in your head at the time. All right. The discus, which is the chakra, which chakras are different levels of your essence, but chakra also was a powerful weapon. The lotus, a symbol of creation. Now remember, what does a lotus do? Kind of like our moonflower. It opens and it closes. It opens and it closes. So the idea of the lotus is to be open to ideas, all right? And the mace, which is the stick, which focuses on the power of time. All right, let's go on next. All right, religions that develop out of Hinduism. I already talked about several of these, and we're going to get quickly to the reincarnation process, which is where I want to finish up tonight. 6th century BCE, same time period, Ezekiel, Daniel, Isaiah, right in that particular time period. So the most prolific time period for the development of religions. Here are the religions that develop in the 6th century. We know what's happening with Judaism because they're in the exile period, but significant in Hinduism, Buddhism is formed there, Jainism, Confucianism, and Taoism. All of those religions form in the 6th century. I don't know what was going on in the 6th century, but something was there to help people start thinking new ideas for whatever reason. So, Daniel, Isaiah, in that particular time period, the exile time period, specifically as it's making the transition from the Babylonian captivity to the Persian captivity. Now, what's interesting about that is another key religion is developing at that time, and that's also Zoroastrianism. Because Daniel and Cyrus, two biblical kings of the Persian Empire, and these are the same two kings that sent the children of Israel back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. They are more than likely Zoroastrian, which has a belief in one deity, which there's all kinds of influence. Where did they get the idea for the belief of one deity? Daniel, Isaiah, Ezekiel. It's mind-blowing when you start to think about these things. All right, Jainism and Buddhism. Now, these are what we call, I'll lock the wheels. This is really an interesting thought process. These are reform movements of Hinduism, okay? So, when we think of reform movements, where else have we heard reform movements? What? Okay, Martin Luther, 1517, October 31st, 1517. Nails 95 arguments with the church on the door of the Wittenberg church. Hang on for next semester when we talk about church history for even more. All right, so there's a little tagline to what we want to do next. All right, so what was Martin Luther trying to do? Was he trying to reform the Catholic Church? Well, to the nominal eye, yes. That's not what he was doing. Reform movements are not trying to reflect something here. Reform movements are trying to get to what existed before. The reform movement of Martin Luther, John Calvin, John Huss, the Mennonites, the Anabaptists, Ulrich Zwingli, all of these individuals, they're not interested in remaking Catholicism. They're saying what was happening before there was Catholicism, otherwise known as the early church. Okay? That's where the reform movements are trying to go. The reform movements of Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism are doing that. They're trying to get back to what were these Aryan rulers thinking? Was it something that Hinduism was doing wrong? Or did they have the caste system back there? So they are both Kshatriyas, and they disallow the caste system. The other thing they do is they reject the Vedas. So they no longer follow the Vedic text. It is out, okay? I can do that. That's not an actual Bible, okay? So it's out. And I just woke some of you up by doing that. All right, so the Vedic text is out, which brings in all of these ideas about the process of the caste system and moving up and the householder state and all these things. We're going to see some of those elements. And the only one of these that we're going to look at is actually Buddhism, but it helps us to understand that. Accomplishment, not sacrifice, determines one's fate. These are, in their very essence, atheistic religions. They do not want anything to do with the help of a deity. So sacrificing to a deity is irrelevant. It's all based on what you do determines your fate, which means that Buddhism has a lot more akin to Mormonism than we would think, okay? Because it's all based on what you do. And it's based on, still on this reincarnation cycle, which we're going to talk about, but it's based on what you do. Jainism teaches extreme asceticism. Now, asceticism is a word that we want to get to and try to understand. Anything that makes you uncomfortable, that's ascetic. What are some ascetic practices? Well, wearing uncomfortable clothing. What are you trying to do? You're trying powered with sound. All right, so Jainism teaches extreme asceticism, so anything that makes you uncomfortable. So we're going to see this in the Catholic Church as well. Celibacy, doing away from your sexual desires, getting rid of that. That's something that happens within. So extreme asceticism, making yourself very difficult. We're not going to talk about Mahavira, so I'm going to do it just a hair now. Mahavira begins with Jainism, but Mahavira won't sleep in the same place twice because he doesn't want to find any comfort. He only eats food given to him. He will never cook food himself, and because he's extreme, he doesn't want to kill any living thing. He strains water in order not to drink anything that's living. But what do we now know, Corey? Even if you strain water, what do you have? You don't want to know what's living in your water, okay? I'm just telling you. These are things I don't really want to know, okay? But it's true. You're doing that. He allows dogs to bite him. It's almost comical at this point. He allows people to burn him. Anything that would cause him pain, because it's getting rid of his self, okay? Now, we're going to find ascetic monks within Christianity. They're celibate. They isolate themselves from the world. They often don't talk. There's all these things, but what are they trying to do? In a spiritual Christian sense, they're trying to isolate themselves from all pleasures that therefore they may focus on God. But you guys know the understanding of this, that the Catholic priest is in heaven and he goes to the library and realizes it wasn't celibate, it was celebrate. He missed the R. Okay, sorry, bad joke. Let's remove that off the tape. All my Catholic friends are going to hate me after that. All right, so this is Jainism and Buddhism, the reform movements, and we'll look at them a little more closely when we get into Buddhism. But let's go on to the reincarnation cycle. If you're going to get one thing, get this. So you have this. Kyle Neiman actually went through my class, and then he made me this diagram, and I'm so thankful. It's such a great diagram. So I want to explain to you the samsara, the journey. If you get one thing from tonight, you need to hold on to this, because this will help you understand a little bit of the Asian mindset, a little bit of the Hindu, Buddhist, Confucianist, Shinto, all of these, their mindset. So what do you have? You have the essential cycle. Take out moksha for a second. You have birth, life, death, rebirth. That's the cycle. At some point, the whole goal is that you reach moksha. Now, how do you reach moksha? Oh, I turned it around. You're Atman, you lose your individuality into what is Brahman, the essence of the universe. All right? When you do that, you've achieved moksha. So this Atman is lost. It becomes one with the Brahman. That's the release of the cycle. So the idea is you're doing this, life form after life form after life form after life form. Anybody remember Carmen? Okay, Christian singer in the 80s, okay? As he said, you don't want to eat a hamburger, you might be munching on your Uncle Tony. Okay, this is what he's talking about with this, all right? So you're going around, which is why Hindus are vegetarian, because of those reasons. So you're going around and around, and if at some point in time in one of your life forms, you go through this process and you reach enlightenment and your Atman becomes one with the Brahman, you go into your moksha. And that's the end goal of Hinduism, of anything with a reincarnation belief, is that you go through this cycle until sometime in your future, sometime in a future life form, you reach moksha. Now, what governs the cycle? What governs the cycle is karma, your consequences, and dharma, your duty. Doing good things increases your karma to come back and elevate up as opposed to de-elevate down. And if you do your purpose, your dharma, this is how you can then achieve something greater. So this is the reincarnation process. This will govern Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Sikhism. This is the thing. So if you get one thing, understand this. Now, as you look at that, what are some conversation starters, maybe with somebody about their faith? And we'll end with this tonight. As you think about this process, hey, where do you think you are in the process of your samsara? But see, just by knowing the topic or knowing something that they can relate to, where do you see yourself now? What kind of hope is generated for your life in the fact that you're where you're at in whatever particular cycle? Which caste do you see yourself from? What do you want for your children? See, these are entry questions that really, with just some knowledge of the understanding of this religion, gives you entry into somebody else's lifestyle to begin to think about that. Yes, ma'am.
As far as like some of my
Mm-hmm.
So they have moved here to America. So I guess even in talking with one particular girl, like what she grew up in is different than the life that she's living now because
Okay.
the opportunities provided here.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that fit into this kind of stuff?
Well, it's actually a great place to start with a question. So my question would be, hey, from what your story is, I hear that this is what life was, and now what you're trying to achieve something else. How does that work out with your faith? Do you see yourself fulfilling a dharma in elevating yourself? What caste would you have been in if you had stayed in India? Or if your family had, because she's probably not even second generation. Her family came here and now she's achieving. No, she came here herself. Okay. So that's very different. In Trishan's family, he was born, I say he is the most suburban white kid for a man who came from Hinduism, because again, his family raised him with all Western values. He was born here. His parents were born in England. But the migration point is often India to somewhere in Africa, and then usually England and to the United States. So there's multiple generations that's happened with. So does that help a little bit as to think about what it is, Gary?
If they come here with the intention of staying in the same caste.
Staying in the same caste. Well, it's interesting. I can't answer that question because it's very individualistic at that point. What I see in the Western culture is most Hindus here are trying to move away from the caste system. So let me use my family. Well, no, I better not do that. It's on video. So what you typically see is current generation has no understanding of it, doesn't want to understand it. Second generation, they understand it, they're moving away from it because that's what their parents want them to do. Third generation, they really understand it. They still got family who are living it in India, but they're moving away from it. So next generation probably was in India, we're really living it. So what we're seeing is third, fourth, fifth generations that seem to all be trying to move away from it. But it's an anchor because they're not only moving away from the caste system, they're also moving away from actual worship in Hindu temples as well. And they're losing the language. So that's what we're seeing. That's what I'm seeing happen. Okay, Christina?
How do they know what caste they're in?
What caste they're in? Where they're at in this? Okay, so understand this is one cycle. So their caste is determining where they are up or down. So imagine it as a spiral, okay, that can go up or down. But this is what they're doing in this particular lifestyle, that they want to focus on their karma and their duty in this lifestyle, or in this life form. But the next life form, they hope to be moving up. Now, the interesting part is, do you keep the same soul? And they don't really have a real understanding of the soul, but does the soul of the life form stay consistent as it moves up and down? Which would be another great question to talk about. Do you believe that the soul of your current life form remembers the soul of your previous life form? Because I'm probably going to show you when we get to Buddhism, I'm going to show you a little animated video of Buddha's life. And in this video, there is specifically within Buddhism the understanding that I remember what I was. So Buddha has this connection when he touches the ground of all of his previous life forms, which kind of indicates that there seems to be some connected element of the individual that stays similar throughout. But I don't see that in Hinduism. I do see it a little bit in Buddhism. Other question? Yeah, Lynn?
So you're in the cycle, who or what decides the consequences, whether you go up or down? There's no God or...
Yeah, that's a great question. So, that does. Which is nothingness. See, this is where it gets very nebulous. The theology of Hinduism becomes very nebulous because is there some external power that's creating this? And you can't say yes because that's nothingness. So it's not even viewed as a power. So the other thing that might be, and this is a question, I don't really know, the deities themselves might have some influence upon that, which makes them deities, that they have influence in that. Okay? Yes, Roger?
What would you expect as far as an answer if you talked about, once you reached your moksha? What are you going through? What life is like?
You cease to exist. So the bottom line is, hope you had fun getting to moksha because you're not going to know you're there. Unless you become an avatar of one of these deities and come back to help others, which was what Buddha believed he was. He believed that he was an avatar of, well, I don't know that he believed he was an avatar of Vishnu. No, I don't think he did. Others have said that's what he was. But he believed he reached moksha while living so that he could help people, because then when he would die, he would cease to exist. That may be the best way to and that's an example of somebody who was thinking that way. What will happen when I reach moksha? I will cease to exist. So the only opportunity that I have is to help somebody here, which is a very atheistic mindset. Tiffany.
Okay, so just, I'm curious.
Curious minds want to know.
So they start from a worm and they go up, right? So they have the ability to go up, down, left, right.
Yeah, and they would actually start below a worm life form, more than likely.
But in that sense, in their belief, they believe that animals have the ability to think, do, behave, etc., to reach the essence of the universe to go up or down.
There must be some conscious understanding within them, yes. That's a good point, yeah. Which is why I shouldn't kill them. Because they have a conscious.
That thought process of humans or babies. So I won't eat an animal because of this, but I'll kill an infant.
Well, okay, I never said that they're killing infants. What I'm saying is they don't necessarily connect the death of an infant to a bad thing. Although it's bringing harm to your own personal self that you are now, but that's just showing that you haven't lost your individuality. Does that make sense? Well, okay, so, yeah.
They don't value a human life, but they value the animal life.
Well, okay, yeah, that's a great question. I don't have any answers to that. No, that's good. That's a great thought. Is it what? Andrew, sorry, Andrew.
As far as like someone's motivation to do good or bad, like if you're a male in the top caste, if you don't reach moksha, you go back down to the bottom?
No.
Will that affect their, I guess, desire to do good or bad, which is kind of worse for you if you go back down to the bottom from the top?
Yeah, because here's what I've understood. In the society, Brahmins are mean. Because they're prideful, because they're above everybody else. And they're the top of the rung. But the idea is they would go into a female, you don't drop to the bottom. It's not chutes and ladders. So you're not going to the bottom, but it's a good illustration. You're going one level down, and then you should work to do good karma to get to the next level up.
And they all go
Does that kind of make sense to your question, or was I really way off of your question?
I mean, for the most part, yes.
Okay.
If you're at the top, like, and you keep doing good, you're just going to stay there. It's not
No, you would reach moksha. Sorry. Yeah, you would hopefully meet moksha. Reach that point. David?
This is going to sound humorous, and I don't mean it to sound humorous.
Well, we need some levity. That's okay.
So, you come from the nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
So you're stuck in this cycle of such a convoluted life of not knowing whether you're going up or going down the ladder, that ultimately you just want nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're so worried about everything that nothingness is a relief from that.
Exactly.
Well, it almost seems like a witnessing tool would be Jesus' scripture says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden," because there's no more heavy laden life than that.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to achieve something, you don't know what you're trying to achieve.
Now, the reality might be, however, that when you're in this mindset, all you're focused in is on your dharma and doing what you're supposed to do. So I've got to do what I'm supposed to do, but you're exactly right. No, you don't necessarily know what you're doing. Yeah. That's the reason, again, darkness pervades this in a huge way. Now, I'm giving you the most uncomplicated version that I can of Hinduism. And there's a lot of other things and a lot of Hindu thought and a lot of Hindu philosophies that would go into this that would attempt to reason away the very things that I've said. And my goal is not to just push this religion down. But as I look at it, I don't see a lot of hope within it. Richard?
So how does Hinduism mesh with technology and Western society? You know, I'm buying things now that are made in India.
Absolutely.
I'm calling a call center to talk about my telephone, and I can't understand the person.
Yeah.
I presume that they're probably in India. How does all of this play out as a person enters into technology and the job market in the caste system?
Very little. It's the Western influence. So most Indians are more, no, not most. There's a lot of higher education in India. A lot.
I have doctors.
The number 2 group, Chinese is number 1. The number 2 group of all foreign exchange students on an F1 or J1 visa are Indian. And so the idea of achieving higher ed or achieving more than what your parents achieved is certainly within the system now. So the particular, the prime minister who's there now, by the way, is up for re-election. Be praying, because he is kicking all Christian organizations out of India, one after another. But Modi is his name. He's unfortunately kind of a buddy of Trump. And so, you know, we would love for that cycle to be broken, to open up. But the reason he is doing what he's doing is because he has the same viewpoint. The reason Trump likes him is he is India first, where Trump is America first. And so what he's saying is, I want Hindu philosophy. I want Hindu religion. We are uniquely Hindu, and yet we're democratic, and this is where we're going. So what you're saying, though, is everything is being elevated, but that's more of the Western influence that's been there.
But how do they reconcile that individually with their faith?
Don't know. Good question.
Are they a happy group?
Well,
Or are they, if they accept their caste systems, it seems like they'd be content, or are they always struggling and to get to the top? And
happiness is not important because it's part of your dharma.
have you been to India?
I have not been to India.
I mean, I would say, are they happy people, or are they content, or are they always like the human spirit?
Now, happy and content's two different things. So contentedness is a desire, but the Western philosophy that's coming in is mixing with that. I think it's a country in search for a current new identity, to be quite honest with you, because you have so much Western influence that's, let's be frank, what does Western influence do? It brings a lack of contentedness in its worst form. So it's conflicting with this idea of just do your duty, and which, what does it make it? Prime ready for the gospel. That's the key to all of this. It's making it prime and ready for the gospel. All right? We're going to conclude with, Linda?
If there are 330 million deities, how do I know which one to find?
Because it's based on your region. It's based on what your family. So your family that now, a great question would be, if I marry someone who's Hindu and I want to go into Hinduism, well, I guess you accept their particular deities. So there's not really a lot of conversion into Hinduism except through marriage. So that's a great question. And I don't know how you would determine it if you weren't related to somebody within it. Sam?
Would it be like an insult to walk into a room full of Hindus and say, like, what up, my Dalits?
Yes. So let's not use that as an evangelism opportunity. Yep.
Is Life of Pi a good movie example of these beliefs?
Yes. But it's weird. You walk away from it going, what did I just watch? So, yeah, Derek, we'll finish with Derek.
Well, what I want to say is a lot of times because I work with the international students, I see a lot of that, kind of like the missionary kids. They're what they call the third culture kids.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of trying to bring the two, what they do like, what they value together and kind of live that out in their own paradigm, developing their own paradigm,
Yep.
living that out.
The word is that it's an amalgamation. It is bringing two opposing ideas into themselves and trying to rationalize it for what it is. Had 2 Nepali girls in my class last semester. One of them asked me to do a TikTok at the end of the class. And I'm like, what? I'm not doing that. But I did. Okay. But I could just see the wheels turning in them. But contentedness, Bob, is what I would have said they are. Because they were calling their parents and, they want their parents to know where they are in this process of this Western system, and they're, taking all these things in. But the more friends they have, the more they become unaware of what was happening at home.
Which is a great opportunity for Christianity.
Which is a great opportunity for the gospel to interchange with that. So that's what we're after here, not just endless knowledge, but a way that we can engage.